you doing? Welcome to the second episode of Big John's Unpopular Opinion. For all those that watched the first one, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. I got a lot of good feedback. I got some good comments back. I do plan on having a guest, hopefully either in person or we could do via the Zoom app, and just to go some dialogue over Biggie not being in my top 5 or me thinking he's the greatest of all time. I seen some people make some good points. I love to have this, conversation with you guys. Just see where I'm coming from. I see where you're coming from, and just to have open discussion. I love hip hop in general. I've been listening to it since I was a little kid to help raise me, so I love to have that kind of conversation. Anything in general, talk about the culture. I love. So those who follow me on Instagram _King_Triton 0915. I've been putting up polls to see what you guys want to talk about. Obviously, the Biggie things that I've been sitting on for a while because I've always had conversation with this around other rap heads and always had this argument. One of my other ones was personally, I think Star Wars is the most overrated film franchise of all time. And I thought I was alone because I used to always get attacked by tons of people that it's amazing and all that. I honestly don't see what people see that's make it so amazing. They're good films, but they're not, whatever. Point is, I put that poll up, and to my surprise, actually majority of people voted that it was the most overrated film franchise of all time. So, it's not an unpopular opinion. I guess people just don't always say it, but, so that takes care of that one. So, like I said, if you follow me on Instagram, or if you don't start following my Instagram, I put my polls up on there, and that's where I decide, which one I'm going to go with. I just throw up some random questions, things that I don't always agree with, and see what you guys pick on. So this week, we're going with Eminem. I just asked a simple question, is he a top 5 MC? That was my only question, and not to my surprise, majority of people, 100% put yes. They put him in there, top 5 MC, like without a no-brainer. I even got some separate DMs of people like, is that even a real question? It's definitely a real question. And obviously the reason why, as you can see the way this show goes, because I don't think he is. I do have him extremely high. So to me, he definitely falls in like the number 6 or 7 spot for me personally. One day, probably on episode Word Music Dance, I'll go over my top 5. Paul has me over and we'll have this conversation. Me and him have been going back and forth on Word on our top 5 for forever, basically. But yeah, so my big thing is, I compile my MC list, and when I do it, I always do it based off, discography. I do it based off record sales. I do it based off, lyrics, content, impact on the culture overall. And then, I break it down from there. That's my way of, going about what, how I break down my favorite MCs, live shows, things like that. And so when I put it in there, Eminem, for me personally, doesn't make my top 5. Although he used to, I would say, back, when the first 3 albums dropped, definitely was in my top 5. Got a little shaky back and forth. I didn't necessarily remove him right away, but got a little shaky. Then, he bounced back and forth in and out the top 5, but he's always stood around 4, 5, or 6, 7, like in that range, back and forth, depending on what album drops, what's going on with him musically, and other artists. Because again, to me, number 1's never stuck at number 1. Other artists can come through. My number 2 could drop another album or do a live show, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you gotta get bumped. For instance, so with M, he keeps dropping albums. Things like that change depending on how good the album was. They help bump his ranking. So with Eminem, we'll just start off straight off the bat. I'll start with the good. Personally, starting with things like, lyrics, his ability to freestyle. I'll touch on that first. Lyrically, if we were doing just lyricists, M is definitely in my top 5. I think he's one of the best lyricists to ever touch a mic overall. I think his complex lyricism sometimes goes over people's heads. Sometimes his punchlines go over people's heads. But then at the same time, sometimes he has these terrible punchlines that me and Paul go back and forth with all the time with our jokes. But yeah, but lyrically overall, there's no doubting his talent, his skill level. He took full advantage of double time rapping and using it to his, way of spinning it. He rhymes words that people don't even know rhyme. Not the way Lil Wayne does, where it doesn't rhyme at all and he just goes with it. He actually makes the words rhyme. And it's pretty impressive overall. Like I said, lyrical skill is it's there, man. His content's there. Even on some of his worst albums where he was heavily on drugs, you could tell he's still lyrically putting words together really well. They're just nonsense words or things that have no content to it at all. But lyrically, He's there. There's no argument for me. He's definitely one of the best, if not the best, depending on who you talk to and what their opinion on. Me personally, I probably would have him in like 1 or 2 of all time when it comes lyrically. I do think he's definitely there. But we'll go on to, next thing is like, obviously sales. So to touch on sales, there's no argument here. Best-selling rapper of all time. I mean, he literally dropped his last album, Kamikaze, with almost no promotion. No one even knew about it. It was kind of like, oh, my album dropping. And then it immediately just took off and sold. But again, his global superstar status, that adds to that. I mean, but I personally don't weigh sales in as heavy. Not to mention that in the beginning, I mean, obviously a lot did help with the white rapper, besides him being skilled to sell. His demographic was a lot larger than normal hip-hop base. So sales-wise, I don't really fully pay attention to sales overall. But with M, I mean, he has broken enough records that it's kind of fair to bring in certain things. But at the end of the day, that doesn't help me build you as a top MC. So, that's one of the things. Then we go with Impact. Impact, I kind of sway back and forth on because he definitely had a huge impact on the game when he first dropped. I don't think that he birthed. Some people sometimes say oh, he birthed the culture of white rappers, which obviously, I mean, everyone knows Nick Vanilla Ice is the third Rob. From third base you have MC Surge. Like, people already know that there were tons of white rappers beforehand. He was just the best lyrically to do it, to get that main stage thing. But before that, I don't think there were, I think he influenced more to start rapping, but it's not like none of them were trying to do it at all. Especially kids who grew up in an urban culture that were already spitting with their friends at lunch tables during school. I don't think that part was there. But overall, he did have a huge impact on the culture across the world, and he definitely helped skyrocket hip hop to a global stage, more where it's not like, for hip hop, underground wise, was real big in other countries. But commercially, certain songs, yes. But the most commercial artists in America, for instance, might not be the most talented, would do well in Europe, where someone who's lyrically better might not sell out shows. Give you, for instance, I remember 50 Cent made fun of Jada Kiss, saying that, he's just local. He's just in his area. He's only known in the tri-state area, kind of thing. Someone like that who could spit wasn't as huge in, across other markets, where someone like Eminem made it where it's like, no, this is rap, this is hip hop. And, he brought a new level of people to the game. So I definitely give him respect for impact. I give him that, right? So that's the good. The good's out of the way. Now we talk about the reasons why I start breaking him down away from my top list. Because originally, again, he was, first 3 albums, he was in my top. He was probably my number 1 at first because I was so hyped behind him. And then, every now and then he get thrown back to 2nd or 3rd when he first came out. But then when I started really building a lesson, I'm older, obviously. His first album dropped for me technically 1999. So I'm, I was like 12 years old. So I really know what I was talking about. I just knew what I liked as a fan. But as I started building a hip hop list as I got older of top 5s, he's always bounced in like the 4 to 7 slot. Never number 1 for me anyway. So the GOAT thing to me is out the question as well, just like Biggie Smalls. But let's go after discography. So technically, first album is Infinite. I honestly don't count it. I don't think any real hip hop fan counts it. Just the people who want to whenever you say Slim Shady LP's his first album, they was like, no, what about Infinite? So you got to just make those nerds happy. No one bought that album. No one listened to that album. I highly doubt, without Googling it, any of you guys could tell me the track list from beginning to end on that album. I, as an Eminem fan, never heard the album. I heard, I think, 1 or 2 songs on a mixtape once, and they were nothing that was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I'll leave that album alone. But we'll start with Slim City LP, phenomenal album. The first time I heard it, I actually didn't know at all it was a white rapper. Not that it mattered, but I didn't know. I never had cable. All we had was the box TV. In New York City, I didn't have cable, so I never got to see a video or anything like that. So I just heard, do rapping, and at that time, at least for my young mind, you only black people rap. There was no white rapper. It wasn't a thing, except for Vanilla Ice, and I only knew him from the Ninja Turtle movie. So, when I found that out, that was pretty impressive overall, because it just wasn't a thing for me at that time and age. At that, I didn't know about all these rappers in the world. So I was impressed by that. But anyways, first album drops, and I think it's obviously phenomenal. I can't really talk to impact at that age because I was so young at that age that literally it was just a guy going off cursing and killing his mother and beating this, and it was funny content, and it was it was fun to listen to. But I couldn't go in deeper on how lyrically he is. Whereas now, going back to that album, I still love that album. I think Rock Bottom is one of my favorite songs ever made. I think Rock Bottom, it definitely speaks to his mindset on the culture where he lived and poverty and how it works. Where I'm from, like obviously you have like the projects, and you have the poverty areas, the burnt down buildings, the crack houses. Where he's from, you have the trailer parks, and it's a different world, but you could relate. If you ever been down to your last dollar, you've been stressed, you ever been not knowing where ends meet, then Rock Bottom, phenomenal song. But anyway, I love this first album. To me, overall, because of what it meant for the culture at the moment, the impact it had, to me, it is a classic album. That's just my opinion. I actually, I think Em has a few classic albums overall, but that's his first album, right? Then you got Marshall Mathers LP, came back, again, killed it. It has Stan. Everyone knows, that song literally like merged the gap between a lot of people. Like you had country artists, you had a bunch of people going to listen to his music. It definitely helped out. The Way I Am, his huge impact. The song itself was just ridiculous. His lyrical ability on that song, going back and forth with that double time rhyme was amazing. I loved it. To me, that is another classic album. Then you had the Eminem Show, which to me, again, another classic album. I love that album. I think it's phenomenal. I do think sometimes I actually go back and forth on whether or not it's classic, because that one does have a couple skips for me, whereas the first two do not. I don't skip any song in the first two. Actually, that's a lie. Slim Shady LP, Hi, My Name Is, I can't listen to anymore. Like it's just annoying. But that happens through repetition. We're talking about almost 20 years, actually 20 years of hearing this song. So it gets a little annoying now. But anyway, Eminem Show has a few skips for me. So I go back and forth whether or not it's classic, but the songs that are there, they hit fucking hard. So, I bounce back and forth. But then this is where you start to see the drop. And then whether it was drug related, whatever the problem were, it's not our problem as fans. Your job is make the music. You make the music. We get to critique it as fans. We get to judge it, and this is where it starts. Encore, terrible album. Even though obviously you had certain songs like Mosh where he was trying to do something. You had a little politically driven, but it still was just a terrible album. The songs like Ass Like That, and just like they were horrible songs on it. There wasn't much to win there. Toy Soldiers, you have a few wins, but nothing much. It doesn't speak volumes to the first three. You can't drop that kind of trilogy, and then your fourth album is this horribleness. So Encore definitely hurt his discography. So it dropped him for me. I started putting more in the 5, part of my top 5. And I know at the time as a fan, I tried to defend him. I was like, no, he's on drugs. He got his issues, blah blah. But again, that's not an excuse. Your job is to make music. If your music is not hitting, it's not hitting. So Encore was a very, very weak album overall. I mean, obviously it's still sold because he is Eminem, but no, that album's terrible. Then you have Relapse, another bad album. I mean, again, heavily on drugs. All the terrible accents on the album. I think out of all of his discography, Encore and Relapse, I've probably listened to the least. I don't think I revisit either one of them at all. Actually, I might Relapse. I think the last song, I think it's called Untitled, if I'm not mistaken. Lyrically, he's spitting as far as putting words together really well, but content-wise, it's just missing. There's no content in that one song, but lyrically, he's spitting. But other than that, there's not really much in that album at all. Just not a fan of that album. I think the album was pretty bad. Had a few tracks that hit a little bit, but overall, just a bad album. So now he has 2 albums in a row that are bad, and I'm like, I'm still defending him to people because he was hard to catch on, and not a lot of people admit it. People who are raw rap hip hop heads, they will feel Eminem. They were on Eminem. Eminem's nice lyrical skill, but coming, at least in my opinion, from the way I grew up, and when we'd argue about rappers, on the stoop, and we talking back and forth with the stoop, a lot of people in a general consensus were not feeling Eminem, at least in the hood when I talked to, because they couldn't relate, which I understood that. My whole problem with Eminem, I always told people, like, if you could relate though, he would have to talk about, whips and selling drugs and gold chains and rims, and that, then you'd call him fake. So I always appreciated him speaking about what he knew, the popping pills and the mommy issues and all that stuff. But these 2 albums, I just couldn't defend. And he started dropping on my list. And then, with Relapse, he was number 5. He was at the 5th of my list because he still had that trilogy, and it hit so hard. And lyrically, he could still give it to the average rapper with no problem. He'd give it to most rappers with no problem. So, you had that. And, that was a big one. Then, years later, he drops Recovery. And I'm like, oh, my God, the Eminem I remember is back. He had great songs on it. He had, overall he spoke more into content. You could tell he was living a better, cleaner life. And it was just overall, it's a good album. I definitely wouldn't call it a classic, but it was a good album. But even then, like, replay value doesn't have as much as his first 3 albums, in my opinion. I don't revisit as much, and I think there's maybe 1 or 2 songs that I still keep from there. So that obviously hurts him. Again, discography to me is a big deal, because that's literally your body of work. Like, that is your body of work. There's no argument here. A freestyle here doesn't matter. A music video here doesn't matter. Your body of work is what matters. And he's now at 3 really good albums, 2 terrible albums, and a half of, I would say, 3/4 of an album. But I still, forgive him. Then he comes up, he drops Marshall Mathers LP 2. I personally think it's a very underappreciated album, but it's still not the Eminem that we know, the Eminem that we wanted as far as his skill set. He's not showing what he could do. So that's a big issue right there. But Marshall Mathers LP 2, I still think was a good album. Again, I don't think it got the love it deserved, but it also wasn't nowhere near his trilogy. So now, you got 2 bad albums, 3 really good albums. Then you have 2 half albums between Recovery and Marshall Mathers LP. You could even call it 1.5 albums. You want to put them together. So, now we have 1.5 mediocre albums, 2 terrible albums, 3 really good albums. So obviously he starts dropping, and now he's like teetering for me on 5 and 6, like a seesaw on my top 5. He's 5 and 6, 5 and 6. Mind you, around this time you have other artists coming in the game, killing it, rapping. So that also affects him, because where I put him on the list. Because that's the thing is, I personally am a huge fan of hip hop, and whenever a new artist that I'm a fan of, or even an older artist I'm a fan of, drops a new album, I move him around like chess pieces about where he places in my list, my top 5. So for instance, let's say like a K-Dot. I'm a huge fan of K-Dot. If he drops another album and his album's phenomenal like his other album's been, then obviously his ranking moves, and it treated the same way. So this stuff obviously hurts Eminem for me. Then we got, Revival. He dropped Revival. Another album that I think didn't get the love it overall deserved, because he did try something different. But at the same time, my man, your job is to make an album for people to love. You try something different. It didn't work. Obviously, the overall consensus was that it wasn't good, and you got to take those lumps. I didn't think it was a terrible sound, but it definitely wasn't a good album. I would say I like maybe half the songs on the album. Maybe it might lean a little towards more than half, but very slightly. Maybe 1 song more than half, but it still wasn't a great album. So Revival kind of didn't do it. And so now we're at, technically, if you want to give them halves and little baby credits, you're at maybe 2.5 good albums, 2 terrible albums. So that's technically 4.5 albums that are not delivering, and 3 albums that did. So now we're at 7.5 albums with more than half of his discography not delivering, in my opinion. And then finally you have Kamikaze. I love Kamikaze. It dropped. It was just lyrical bars, spitting, killing it, which is great. However, it was just pure lyrical bars. It wasn't a good album. It was just something good to hear. Like, oh my God, that's the Eminem. He's back. And it was good to hear, but it still wasn't a good content album. He really hasn't had that in a long time. And to speak to Joe Budden's point, for instance, one thing he does lack, and he lacks hugely in his discography and in his freestyles and his little spits here and there, is content. Content's a big deal. You could rap your ass off, but if you're not talking about nothing, what does it matter? Like, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. So, it doesn't really mean anything if you're not talking about anything. Your content gets thrown, it can't get thrown around. Content's extremely important to an album. So it makes an album what it is. It makes the body of work what it is. Imagine a book that's well written, but it's a terrible book. Horrible ending, horrible getting, no character development. But, the literature is great, but, it's terrible. So, that hurts him. So Kamikaze, although to me still a good album, I'm not going to put it bad. It's not what his first 3 were. So literally, if you think about it, now Eminem discography-wise, just downward spiral. You have him starting really great and then keeping it up. And then after album 3, just straight down. So now Eminem's in my 6th, 7th spot. Currently, if I had to do it on top of my head, I'd probably drop him in around 6 or 7 of all time, but not top 5. And then statistically, he would have to drop like 2 more Marshall Mathers LP, Eminem show quality albums to even get back in towards that top 5. Just on discography alone, we're talking about at the moment. But that's a huge hit. That's a huge hit. And then now, on top of discography, going over overall content. So his content, again, agreeing with Joe Budden, his content is just hasn't been there. He hasn't really talked about much. he hasn't really learned much. One of my things for albums that I love, so there's two kind of albums that I listen to an album. I like albums that I could listen to the car with, like I'm driving, and it just has a good beat, it's up tempo. So maybe it's not the best rapper, maybe it's not the best thing. Some rappers could do it where it's both, but maybe it's not the best, but I'll still give it a listen, and I'll love it while I'm driving. But once I'm home, I don't want to hear that shit. While I'm home, just trying to get my get my head straight, I don't want to hear that shit. Whereas like there's albums where I want to get content, I want to learn something from. I want to get I want it to impact my life somehow or change something. Much like when you read a book, you could read a book for entertainment or read a book that's entertaining but yet still teaches you something. And that's what I like from my albums. And M just doesn't have that, and his content overall doesn't have that. Even his freestyles, in my opinion, M is one of the better freestyles because he actually freestyles. Like he's actually doing it off the bat with the top of his head. Obviously, no one's a machine. I think all rappers have some kind of writtens mixed in, and they spin them together. But overall, it's a genuine freestyle. But because it's genuine freestyle, that's why you get like the uba tuba duba stuff. When you get like the I robbed the walrus kind of lyrics, where it's like, all right, I mean, it rhymed, but like, why'd you rob a walrus? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like it's kind of just dumb lyrical content that doesn't really add anything. So yes, he's spitting and it rhymes really well, but he's not saying anything, and that's almost all his freestyles. And then the last part, I'm gonna add this for Eminem because he was such a big part of this, battle culture. So when I was younger, I had Eminem as a real high battle artist because again, when you're young, sometimes you're more educated than you think you are, but like when it comes to overall hip hop, I still was, my eyes were closed, and I really didn't understand as deeply as I did now because we're talking about young, I'm talking about like junior high school, kind of thing. So I'm still learning. And with M, I always thought like he was an amazing battle rapper. He would kill anyone, like literally anyone in the world because of all the hype behind him. But then when you start breaking apart, the layers, he never really battled anybody who was a top rapper at all. When you think about it, the closest you get is probably Cannabis, who lyrically can do his thing, but he still wasn't a real matchup for him. So he never really battled anyone of that level when it comes to that kind of thing. And then one of the things I used to say, and I still kind of believe, is that at the same time, no one really started fights with him either of that kind of high level rap. And I do think there are rappers who don't want any part of him lyrically at that level, but it's a back and forth thing. He hasn't battled anyone of that content, so there's no way to really tell battle rap. So when I was younger, I gave him a huge respect as a battle rapper. But as I got older, to realize, the people he went after, the battles that he did, and the fact that he's never really had a real battle to compare with someone who's on his lyrical level, I kind of lowered his level down as far as battle rapping. I'm sure most of you guys, if you really think about it, you probably lower his level down. If we actually created like a rapper bracket of, rappers who spit and battle rap, I don't think you guys would have Eminem as a clear-cut winner, whereas a lot of people would like years ago, because when you start to realize, his battles weren't, like, again, he didn't take down anyone that was like, oh my God, this guy, I can't believe he killed this lyrical rapper. You know what I mean? He didn't have his Jay-Z Nas moment, for instance, in my opinion. So that, that's another big deal. He battled, Benzino, Ja Rule, who was kind of already dead anyway from 50 Cent. More recently, Machine Gun Kelly. I do think he had the better lyrical song track over this track, but MGK had a better song catches your ears. That's how it works. You put yourself in that predicament. But I would love to see, if it ever happens, him and Joe Budden go at it, because that's content. Like, that'd be crazy. I do think Joe would take him on content on that, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, so when you break it down, just do a wrap up. When you go over all these things, although I do have him really high in certain places, much like Big, he's not number one in most of those places. He's just high up in those places, and he's lower in a lot of other places, like Discography, which to me, your MCing, your live show, which I've never seen him live, but the live shows I've seen on video, like Eminem throws a crazy live show. I've seen the Up and Smoke tour, and he looks like he throws a crazy live show. He has a lot of energy, which is cool. But live show, MCing, and then lyrics, content, and Discography, what I judge you on the most. And for me, content just isn't there, at least not since, Eminem's show dropped. Here's spots, but it just isn't there overall. And then Discography, my man, out of all those albums, we're talking, 9 albums, I'm mistaken. You have 3 solid albums that are, solidified, that no one will argue that's great. And then you have a very rocky ending, and you have a terrible middle. So Discography hurts you really bad. Because Discography is the most important part of your body of work, at the end of the day, if all you have is your discography, because that's what really defines you, I think his hurts really badly against a lot of artists. And what's worse for him compared to the Big episode I just did is that Big only had 2, so it's hard to go off the discography versus having 5. We have more than 5 albums. You need to have solid discography to be in that top 5, in my opinion. But again, that's just my unpopular opinion. Stay tuned. Again, please, guys, comment. Send me anything you guys want to talk about. A debate we can do. We can have a back and forth. Or even subject matter you guys think I should talk about, or you want me to do a poll of. I definitely have no problem doing a poll on my IG and seeing what people think. I'm gonna keep doing the polls, so watch out for those. Make sure you guys vote, because that's what has me decide what episodes I'm gonna do. For instance, next episode coming to you hopefully Friday next week. Nas is Illmatic, Nas's best album. That's my discussion. That's what we're gonna talk about. Stay tuned, guys. Again, this is Big John, representing 2021 Vision. Make sure you follow me. Make sure you subscribe to 2021 Vision on YouTube so you could, get the things whenever it comes in, new episodes. There's always new content. Paul's always making this thing happen. And, show love, support your friends. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, hit the like button. Share it. Tell your friends about it. Let them know what's going on. Also, hit subscribe and the bell to be notified when new content is loaded, because there's much, much more to come.